Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to wait a few minutes as all of our participants log in. Mr. Russell, how many are we expecting?
690.
Okay, we are up to 477. Hello again, everyone. We are just waiting for all of our participants to log in, make sure that they're available to see our presentation before we get started. Just a few more seconds. Ryan, if you could give me a cue when we feel like we're good to go, and then I'll go ahead and get started.
Yes, sir. Dr. Hanson, we're pretty steady now. I believe you're good.
Okay. Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Dr. Tim Hanson, Superintendent of Warren Township. I know we might have some new staff on our webinar today, so I want to take a few minutes to go over our agenda and also introduce our panelists for today. So we have an hour scheduled to go over our webinar, and during that time, we're going to share with you our SAFE proactive plan, and we're also going to share some details of our proposed reopening plan. So at this time, I would like to introduce Rachel Burke, who is our school board president, Ryan Russell, who's our assistant superintendent for K-12, Allison Woods, our assistant superintendent for exceptional learners and whole child. Many of you know David Holt. You may know that he has a new title. So David Holt is our Chief Operations Officer. You've probably seen Kim Howard's name in many places, and she is our Director of School Nursing. Pam Griffin is a familiar face with a new title. She's our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Assessment, School Improvement, and Student Programming. Most notably, she will oversee our K-12 virtual program. Brian Simpkins, Chief of Human Resources, and Kent Schroeder Cleanup, our Chief Technology Officer. So thanks everyone for participating today. So as I mentioned before, we are, oh no, other way. Sorry about that. Making me dizzy now. We created our reopening plan around 4 pillars, and it's an acronym for SAFE. And the first one is the safety of our students and staff. Throughout our webinar today, and when you have a chance to view our reopening plan, you'll see that the safety of our students and staff is the highest priority for us reopening for the 2021 school year. The A is for academics, athletics, and extracurriculars. We will continue to provide a safe and high quality experience for our students. The F is for facilities and operations. Our facilities and operations play a critical role in providing a safe and learning environment for students and staff. And the E is for equitable access and outcomes. We will be committed to providing students and you with the resources needed to be successful next year. So let's talk a little bit about safety of students and staff. I want to let everyone know that, and through lots of questions that we received from staff, and thank you for submitting those, we will be providing all staff both classified and certified, with PPE. And at this time, I would like to demonstrate what you will be receiving when the school year starts. Every staff member, again, certified and classified, will receive a high quality face shield that basically you wear like glasses that can be used as a face covering when social distancing is not possible. So everyone will receive a really nice face shield to wear. Also, all staff, both certified and classified, will receive one cloth face covering. And if you would like to wear them both at the same time, feel free to do so. But both of these will be in a welcome package for you. All staff, again, classified and certified, will receive a personal supply of hand sanitizer. And later on, Mr. Holt will share with you that we have purchased quite a bit of hand sanitizer to supply classrooms, our buildings and facilities later on. I do want to skip ahead a little bit to this next slide to show you kind of what we'll be sending home to parents. The image that has the students or people with the masks and not masks. So essentially all K-12 MSD Warren students and employees will be required to wear a face covering. I just showed you two samples of what those could look like. All MSD Warren students and staff will be provided with at least one washable face covering, which I showed you. And I'll get into kind of what are the guardrails to that. The face covering dues, these are reminders that we will send home to our families, and it applies to staff as well. Face coverings need to cover your nose and mouth. You need to wear your face covering snugly against the side of your face. It should be loose enough to allow for easy breathing. And the face covering should be washed daily or discarded if they are disposable. Face covering don'ts: do not place face coverings on the forehead or around the neck. Do not share your face coverings with others. Do not touch your face coverings, and if you do, wash your hands or use hand sanitizer to disinfect. Do not wear face coverings that contain inappropriate language or images. A replacement face covering will be provided in these situations. We are reminding our families that if they have not done so already, they can request up to 5 free masks from indy.gov, and we are supplying the link for our families there. In addition, if our families are in need of face coverings for their students, they can contact our community outreach hotline or email us, and we will make every effort to make masks available for them. On the other side of this slide is our face covering requirements by location and personnel. So if you look in that first one, that's for all MSD Warren K-12 students. Masks are a requirement, or face coverings are a requirement on the bus, entering and exiting school buildings, during passing periods, while using restrooms, while in the serving line or throwing away garbage in the cafeteria, and when they're in the nurse's clinic. We will note on here for both students and staff throughout this slide that if wearing a face covering is not possible due to a medical or health reason, parents or caregivers should notify their school. Employees should notify their supervisor right away. When we are looking at the classroom, both inside and out, students will be required to wear a face covering unless exempted by the teacher. And here are some possibilities for exemption. Students are physically distanced from 3 to 6 feet and all facing the same direction. Students are physically distanced from 3 to 6 feet and they're engaging in a no talking activity. And students are physically distanced from 3 to 6 feet if learning is taking place outside. We will not require students to wear masks or face coverings while eating or drinking. We will have kind of a flexible requirement when they're at recess, physical education, or outdoor activities, with the stipulation of the physical distancing of 3 to 6 feet. So essentially, if you're outdoors and you are able to physically distance, masks are not required. For staff and instructional assistants, so this would be all classified and certified staff, you will be required to wear a face covering at all times when working with students. As I mentioned before, if you have a physical, medical, or health reason that you cannot wear one, you will need to communicate that to your supervisor immediately. If you are working with students and you are able to physically distance between 3 to 6 feet, we will allow you to utilize your professional judgment in those situations. I'm going to ask Mr. Russell to talk about mask management a little bit, because this has also come up quite a bit in terms of how we will enforce the mask wearing requirements.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen. First of all, there were several questions that came in previous to the webinar specifically about face covering and mask use. So we just wanted to spend a few moments to talk about what our process and plan is for both the teaching, the appropriate teaching of all students in grades pre-K through 12, about why we're wearing the mask and how the mask should be worn, how we will monitor mask use, and then pressing, in which the questions came in, how we will enforce mask use. We will work collaboratively with WA through our discussion process and other venues to develop a process that will certainly take a management style process that will do all those things, but the requirements specifically about what that enforcement is going to look like. We believe strongly that the first step is always teaching in any discipline process. However, we're prepared, and as we work through this process, for students who intentionally refuse to wear masks to potentially could result in being specifically assigned to virtual school if they're not able to wear their mask in traditional face-to-face instruction. So we'll provide clear guidelines as far as what that means. There will be a sequential step process that will take, and more specifically, we'll make sure that that's universally applied, and we provide that opportunity for the safety of staff and students.
Dr.
Yeah, thank you. At this time, we want to talk a little bit about the self-screening process, both for students and the expectations for our parents and caregivers. And then we will also talk about that process for staff. So this is a one-pager that we will be sharing with our families to take home. And as Rachel described it, this is fridge material. So we would ask them to put it on their refrigerator so that it's in front of them on a daily basis. And this is something that we want to become a routine, just like putting on their shoes and brushing their teeth before they come to school. It will be an expectation that our parents and caregivers screen their students before coming to school each day. We have listed the CDC symptoms list, and we also provided the link so that in case the symptoms list were to change, that they would have access to the most updated list. It's important to note, both for students and staff, that if someone is exhibiting 2 or more symptoms of COVID-19, that there is not an alternate explanation or that is not otherwise explained, they need to take those symptoms serious and exclude themselves from school and contact their family doctor or physician. If they have one symptom or more than one symptom, but they know they're allergic to something, or they typically get headaches, if they have an explanation of why they're experiencing one of those symptoms, then it's not necessary to exclude themselves from school or work. As I mentioned before, we've provided the list. I do want to highlight here that students and employees will be excluded from school if they test positive. That seems like common sense, but I want to make sure that that's explicitly mentioned, or exhibit 2 or more of the symptoms of COVID-19 based on our current guidance from our local and state health departments that are not otherwise explained. I think it's also important to know that there are some emergency signs the CDC has added to that list, and you can see those on your screen. In those cases, the recommendation would be to call 911 and communicate that you're experiencing these symptoms similar to COVID-19. There have been some questions whether or not we are going to do screening at school or before students get on the bus. And at this time, our current thinking is not to do that. Again, we are going to require our parents and caregivers to do that before they leave for school. We do recognize that in the past, parents may have given their child some Tylenol if they had a fever in the morning. Call me if it comes back. We recognize those situations will happen, and we will address those as they come our way. So that's for the students and caregivers and parents. At this time, I'm going to ask Brian Simpkins, our HR Chief of Human Resources, to kind of address what that looks like for our staff.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Screening for our employees and staff, and that includes myself, my staff, and all employees, will be incumbent upon the employee to take responsibility on a daily basis to self-screen and self-monitor your health. If you haven't already, you will receive from your supervisor a basic monthly self-screening questionnaire / log to on a daily basis before you approach work, before you come to work and physically report to work, whereby you would answer 3 questions. One has to do with the symptoms, as Dr. Hansen just explained, and is going to be in our planning document. So number 1 is, are you exhibiting any of those symptoms and that are otherwise unexplainable, as was just touched upon? The second question will be, are you positive for COVID-19? And the third screening question is, have you been in close proximity or near anyone in the last 14 days who was either positive for COVID or has been exhibiting symptoms? One of the things between this planning document and for those employees who have a Warren email and login and password and are familiar with our Safe Schools online safety training, there has already been assigned a coronavirus awareness course. So as soon as possible, on or after your first day of reporting to work, if you take that 10-minute course, you'll get a little bit more background on the virus and some of the common symptoms and so on. So this is going to be one of those things with regard to screening that we're going to have to all of us will have to just get used to and condition ourselves. So before you go to work, whether it's at home or before as you're in your car, you're going to want to make sure that you record the date and check off that you can answer successfully no to the 3 questions I just mentioned and initial it. Your supervisor, based on a directive from the superintendent or a superintendent's designee, reserves the right to collect those at certain times, which would be communicated to all employees, just to make sure that we're all being held accountable and holding one another accountable with this area. So again, screening will be imperative and a responsibility on the employee and all staff members to do before reporting to work.
Are you good there, Mr. Simpkins?
Yep.
Okay. All right. For our facilities and operations, David,
sorry to interrupt, did you want me to jump into the COVID response protocols?
Yes, please, if you could.
Okay. So just to reiterate what I've said before, for any staff member who has concerns about your own health, whether you're medically compromised or you have an immediate family member who's got a health condition that you're concerned about, or even once you've had a chance to review all these materials as we're leading up to the start of school, or even once school starts and you're already physically reporting to work, if you have any concerns about your workstation, things that you see that maybe you have questions about, or you think maybe need to be in place with respect to your specific situation, please do not hesitate to contact your supervisor or myself. I am more than happy to discuss those issues with employees, and if there are any kind of additional accommodations above and beyond what we're already providing for all employees under these circumstances, please just let me know so I can advise you. That said, even before COVID, when it comes to benefits, pay, leaves of absence, I don't expect employees to be legal experts. I don't expect employees to necessarily know all the complexities related to those things. So again, with everything that I'm about to address here, if you ever have any questions, or if you find yourself in a specific situation, just know that your supervisor is going to alert me right away, and then myself and or one of my staff members is going to immediately contact you so that you don't feel like you're on an island and left alone to figure it out. We will be there to navigate for you any of the timelines that apply to you specifically, any types of documentation you may need, and anything you know about before you could return to work. So on the subject of returning to work, as you can see here, there is a slide with regard to returning to school after exclusion, and it addresses students and employees. I find this very helpful. And so even though I may not be able to cover today every type of scenario, as you can see here, the first two categories are referencing those situations where one is not tested, but has some kind of symptoms, with an explanation or without an alternate explanation. So you may be in a situation where you exhibit some of the COVID symptoms, but maybe it turns out upon going to the doctor that really it's strep, or as Dr. Hansen referenced, maybe it is related to some other health condition that you have already where these symptoms are common. So in something involving a fever like strep, if we can rule that out, then we kind of revert to our returning after 24 hours fever-free kind of situation. If you're not tested and there is no alternate explanation for your symptoms, then you're looking at being home for 10 days from the first day that symptoms appeared. And then you cannot return to work until there's at least 72 hours, consecutive hours, fever-free and without further symptoms being exhibited. Then as you can see, we kind of get into situations where one is tested and either the test indicates negative or positive, but one does have symptoms. So in the example of being tested and negative, if there's no alternative explanation, then it's kind of an isolation/quarantine for at least 10 days. And again, the 72 hours of being fever-free or symptom-free. And then, as you can see, then an individual can return to work if tested negative, and a note from your provider that there's an alternate diagnosis. Then there's also the situation where you may be tested and positive. Again, one of the things that helps me straighten this out is if you are positive or ill yourself, a lot of times it applies that 10 days, 72 hours thing. But then at the bottom, and this is going to be one that impacts people as well, is where you don't have any symptoms yourself, but you come into close contact or what I call first-degree exposure with somebody who has been tested positive for COVID-19, or based on that screening protocol I mentioned, if you know that you've been in close proximity in recent days to somebody who's been exhibiting those COVID symptoms, then you may be in a situation at the very bottom of that chart whereby you may have to be quarantined from the last day that you were exposed to that positive person, and for 14 days. As long as you remain symptom-free, then you can return to work. There's a number of different scenarios, as you can see, that relate to a whole host of fact-sensitive issues. And so, as I said at the outset, a lot of this is going to be based on screening. In some cases, people may screen in the morning and then maybe halfway through the day find out that a relative that they were hanging out with the previous weekend tested positive. And if that happens, then of course, you would want to notify your supervisor, and then you're gonna be excluded from work and sent home and then I will reach out to you and go through these steps with you. Or it may be a situation where frankly you do develop symptoms throughout the day, or maybe you have symptoms as part of the screening process. You catch that before you even report to work. So a lot of fact-sensitive details, but as you can see, there are various timelines that are applied depending on whether you yourself are ill, are exhibiting symptoms, or have tested positive, or whether it's a situation where you are in close contact with somebody who is exhibiting symptoms or has tested positive. So no matter what the situation is, we'll walk through it and let you know what you need to do and when you can return to work. But like I said, once you've had a chance to review this and read it, let your supervisor and myself know if you have any further questions.
Thank you, Brian. There's a lot there.
Thank you.
So, couple things. When we do have a confirmed positive COVID-19 case, our first action item will be to contact the Marion County Public Health Department, and they, within 24 hours, they will assist us in assessing the situation to determine what our next steps will be, whether we can, if the situation was isolated or whether it was a larger exposure. That obviously will be case by case, but that will be our first step if a confirmed COVID-19 case exists. At the bottom of that sheet, this would be both for students and staff. There's a link to all of the testing sites here in Indiana. It is updated frequently. However, we encourage you to call in advance. There are some walk-in sites that are on there as well, but you would want to make sure that we call before you headed that way. Okay, thanks, Brian. Again, at this time, we will ask David Holt to share a little bit with us about cleaning and sanitation.
Thank you, Dr. Hansen. Welcome, everyone. The message that we've been consistently hearing for several months, three main things. Social distancing or wearing face coverings when social distancing isn't possible. And then there's two other things that are important that involve our facilities and operations, and that would be washing your hands or have access to hand sanitizer, and then really ensuring that you're cleaning and disinfecting areas appropriately. So it's important for us to identify all high-touch surfaces and make sure that those are going to be clean and sanitized throughout the day by our custodial staff in every building. That includes doors, handles, chairs, rails, sinks, counters, anything that, we can, students will be putting their hands on. We're going to need to make sure that we're cleaning and sanitizing that throughout the day. Other high traffic areas such as restrooms, nurse's office, main entrances, walk-through security areas, those are going to need to be cleaned and sanitized throughout the day as well by our custodial staff. And with that, for our buildings, with some of the shutdown, we've had the opportunity to look at our HVAC systems, ask some questions, but more particularly identify new ways to look at filters. We've been able to replace and find filters that maximize particle filtration to increase airflow and increase the air quality throughout our buildings, as well as looking at maximizing our external exhaust fans and running those at maximum capacity to increase circulation throughout the building. When you do that, that's one of the things we're going to have to monitor is when you increase that maximum outdoor air circulation, we're going to have to monitor temperature and humidity in our buildings, especially as we come back in a warmer setting here in August. Secondly, as we kind of focus on having available hand sanitizer, hand soap, and those types of things, every single classroom, high traffic area is going to be equipped with spray disinfectant. QT3 is a very effective sanitizer for COVID as a very short dwell time. We are also going to be putting in hand sanitizer in every classroom and high traffic area. Both of those will be monitored and refilled on a daily basis by our custodial staff. We'll also be supplying microfiber towels and places to just put the towels on when those are being used. We'll in essence create almost like a housekeeping service so that those areas that have these sanitizing stations, as we use those microfiber towels on a daily basis, we'll pick those up. We'll transport those on a daily basis to our commercial laundry service over at Porter Services, clean those, and then each day replenish those in those high traffic areas. Classrooms that have sinks, we've been going around and trying to ensure that all of those sinks are working and effective and have appropriate hand soap and paper towels available, because it's just as important to wash your hands as it is to use hand sanitizer. We also know that there's a tremendous opportunity to, from signage perspective and educating our students, visitors, community. So we have been working with several vendors, but most specifically, I want to give a shout out to our print shop, Dave Prevost, Billy Heberly, who have been tremendous in helping us provide and create signage. So you will see custom-made Warren Township signs that we are now receiving, that we're going to be putting up in our buildings that talk about social distancing, hand sanitizing stations, thank you for washing your hands. As we go into the restroom and other areas, we're going to thank people for washing their hands. We're just going to put these all over the place. We've been purchasing large poster type signs that we'll be putting in all of our lobbies to let visitors, staff, parents, students know their responsibility as they're coming into the buildings. And then we'll also be purchasing additional signs that we can put out in our parking lots for car riders. It's just important before people come into our buildings as visitors that they understand and comply with all of the rules that we've been setting up.
Thank you, David. Ryan and Kim, could you guys speak to a little bit about what is an isolation room and how will those look in our facilities?
Sure, Ryan, you may go first.
Ladies first.
In all of our buildings, there has been a separate area identified. Not going to refer to it as the isolation room, but more of a screening room. Any staff or student that should become ill during the school day will be directed to go there in lieu of going to the school nurses clinic. It will be staffed by hopefully the school nurse, and if in the secondary buildings where we have more than one nursing staff, we will designate one of those to be in charge of the assessment room each day. The assessment room will be a screening room. They will be, a temperature check. They will go through the banner of questions. When did this happen? Who have you been exposed to? And that staff or student, if positive to any COVID situation or symptoms, will be asked to stay in there until arrangements can be made to get them either to a testing facility, to their doctor, or to get them home. The school nurse's office will be open and remain functional. It will be for daily medications. It will be for injuries and other illness that occur during the school day that are not COVID related. I know it's kind of hard to differentiate between that right now, but we, we'll have some set guidelines as to what we, can see, in the nurse's office. It was stated that school students will be expected to wear masks in the nurse's office, and that is true. They will, be allowed to take their medication and step in the nurse's office without their mask and drink of water. We're going to try to keep the nurse's office for the daily operations of, the medications, the treatments, the things like that we have to do on a daily basis, and keep the screening room separate so that those hopefully that, become sick during the school day and those who are in a healthier state don't have cross-contamination. So, Ryan, anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, the isolation room is really just a strategy to make sure that we're obviously isolating students that may be demonstrating or experiencing any symptoms that could be related to COVID. It's not necessarily suggesting that students with, the virus are in there, but out of abundance of caution, we wanted to make sure that there was two separate isolated locations. One, as Kim referred to, as traditional nurse use for the daily medication use, for the injuries or anything else that may happen with that. The other one is a designated spot in the building that is going to be used for nothing else at no other time other than an isolation room. So that's primarily a location has been identified at each campus that's close to the nurse's office for that process to be able to take place.
Thank you, Ryan and Kim. Allison, would you talk to us a little bit about equitable access and outcomes?
Absolutely. There's a couple of things I want to cover on here. First, I'm really excited if you guys haven't heard about the Moorhead Community Resource Center. For those of you guys who have been around a while, our previous Moorhead Elementary, located on 10th Street, just west of Post Road, we are creating a community resource center at through our strategic planning and through this closure with COVID and needs that we've identified at that time. We've really found that this is a need in our community to be able to have a place here on the Far East Side that they can go to be able to get support, to be connected with resources that they need, to be able to have somebody there to help navigate some of those complicated systems. We are partnering with Sunny Day Community Center, who will be moving over to Moorhead, so we can provide clothing and food needs. And so we are very excited about this and the service that it can provide to our families, and are hopeful to have that open here coming soon in August. With that, we created an outreach hotline right about in March when everything closed. And we really have two hotlines. We have an outreach hotline, and we have our registration summer learning packet right now hotline. But that is a hotline that you can always direct families to if they identify needs with food and with shelter, anything that is a higher level need than what you can support with. Please always direct them to that so we can help connect them with resources and information they need. So that will continue when our community resource center opens, and just be serviced and supported by that. I want to talk a little bit about exceptional learners. So we have a number of different things. We are recommending for our resource and for EL students, we are really going to be moving to a push-in model. EL has already been primarily push-in. Special ed, we are going to look at how we can push into classrooms. And so we've had some conversations with principals at looking at how students are distributed in classes, so we can make sure that we're grouping those students in a way that it makes sense that we can push into classes. We are asking our general ed teachers to identify a space where we can have that small group and instruction occur inside the classroom. But we're really trying to limit movement around the building and grouping kids together from different classes as much as possible. If we do have to pull out, because we know that there are situations that we need to, our goal is to try to do that directly outside the classroom or pretty close outside the classroom. We are still going to maintain having conferences virtually, again, to help limit visitors. And that seemed to work, although not perfect when we were closed. That did seem to work. So we're going to continue to do conferences and meetings virtually as much as possible. I know that there may be some exceptions that you can work with your principal on, but we're going to try to do that as well. All of our special programs, we still want to have opportunities that if they push into classrooms that they can, but we are going to be mindful about different jobs that they have in the building. There are some jobs that involve high touch areas. And so we're going to have to make sure that we're really assessing and looking at that. Also, all of our programs will be attending in person daily, all of our special programs. So Life, FA, IMHP will be attending all 5 days in a school building. I've received lots of different questions in regards to what happens if I am out and who's responsible for data tracking, and what about if students pick a virtual option. All of our exceptional learners, our EL students, our high ability students can choose a virtual option, and we will be able to service them in that virtual setting. What that does mean is that we will be having conferences for families for our EL, which that's new. We haven't had EL conferences in a while, but EL, our special ed, our 504, if they choose virtual, we will be having some conferences because we will need to revise some IEP goals and look at our services to make sure that they are being supported in that way. And then much like we have our virtual teachers, our goal is to have virtual special ed and EL folks to support those students as well. But those are available to our exceptional learner population as well. But some of the questions that I've gotten are who's responsible for data collection? What happens if I'm sick? There are a lot of different scenarios, and we're going to have to work through those. So I would say as those unique scenarios come up, not necessarily as we're worried about those or thinking about those, we're creating guidance for as much as we can, and then we're going to have to navigate the rest of those individually with you and your building principal. So please reach out as things come up, and when we have that additional guidance, we will be sharing that with you as well.
Thank you, Allison. Kent, could you talk to us a little bit about internet access?
Yes, thank you. We recognize that home internet access may be an issue for some of our students. So with that in mind, we purchased Wi-Fi internet hotspots from T-Mobile. These are broadband speeds with unlimited data, much better than the Kajits that we have used at the high school in the past. These will be available on a limited basis to families who request one through their school. However, students who are participating in the virtual model will receive priority for these hotspots.
Great.
Dr.
Okay.
Hanson.
Yep, thank you. Before I get into the learning model that we are proposing for next school year, I kind of want to share this statement that has really been on my heart, and I know it's been on all of our hearts, of how much our kids need us. We knew that before COVID-19. We especially know that since COVID-19 has happened. And the other thing that it's been at the forefront of this is that our staff deserves a safe environment. And the plan that we are proposing to move forward with, we feel puts us in the best opportunity to provide both, to provide access to our students and to provide a safe environment for our staff. So as I share that, please know that that was at the guiding principle of our decision-making here. For the fall, or for the upcoming school year, we are going to propose a few options for our students and families. The first part of that option will be K-5, kindergarten through 5th, the default will be in person. As you know, we are providing a option for virtual, and I apologize, that 400 plus number is a little inaccurate. That's specifically K4 numbers. When we look at K5 numbers, that number is probably a little bit closer to 500. So right now we have about 500 families or 500 students that have opted for the virtual option. What that's going to allow us to do at the K5 level is that's going to allow us to reduce those class sizes so that we can better physically distance students and staff in those rooms. Earlier this summer, Ryan Russell and Allison Woods did an audit, and our maintenance folks did an audit of all of our classrooms to identify how many students we could have in each classroom depending on what level they were at. At the K-5 level, knowing that we have about 500 students that are going to select the virtual model, we are confident that we can create those environments where that physical distancing can be put in place. Our next model at the 612 will be an alternating days model. And what this means is that we will have students be placed in a black schedule and a gold schedule, where they will spend 1 week with 2 days in person, which is the IP, and 3 days virtual. The second week, which would be their gold schedule, would be 3 days in person and 2 days virtual. The way we are thinking right now is that one of those days will be a direct instruction day when students are in person with their teacher, and the virtual day will be called an application day, where they apply what they learned the previous day. We are still offering a virtual option for 612. So even though we're offering a alternating day schedule where they will attend half the time in person, we are also offering that option for our families who do not feel or cannot send their students back even 50% of the time. When we're looking at the alternate day option, we will be dividing our students by alpha or household. And we're still working out those details, but this allows us to make sure that if families have multiple students in grades 6 through 12, that they don't have conflicting schedules. So if they have a sixth grader and a freshman, but they have different last names, or they're living in the same household but may not be siblings, they will be placed on the same schedule to make it easier for our families. We're working through those details right now with technology and our scheduler, and also through transportation. So again, our 612 model will be an alternating day model, black and gold schedule, with 1 day being a direct instruction day and the second day being an application day. We'll have more details on that model here soon. A recommendation that we'll be putting forth in front of the board tomorrow is an adjustment to our school calendar. In order to, for a variety of reasons, we're going to ask the adjustment be made. The first adjustment will be starting on August 6th. This moves our start date back 6 days. And we would be starting on a Thursday, which would allow us to have 1 black day and 1 gold day. So students would have that opportunity to experience and practice that. As a result, we will adjust the staff report days by 6 days. So rather than July 23rd being your first day, and don't quote me on that, I apologize if that's not our first teacher report day, that will be adjusted by 6 days. In order to adjust for this, we will be looking to take 1 week from our spring break, and we will be moving the last day of school from Thursday, May 27th to Friday, May 28th. Again, going back to why we will adjust the August 6th start date. We know we've seen an increase in COVID cases due to a variety of reasons. 1, July 4th weekend. 2, we have had staff and families and residents of Indiana travel outside of state, whether it be to Florida or to some of the southern states where they're seeing an increase in COVID cases. We recognize that the Marion County Fair is still taking place, which could cause an increase in COVID cases. This allows us to get through that, and this allows us to continue to monitor those cases. We also know that Marion County put into effect a mask mandate, which started last Thursday. It's our hope that by August 6th, that mask mandate will have a significant impact on lowering the COVID-19 cases here locally. Please know, we will continue to monitor the numbers. We will continue to have conversations and collaborate with the local and state health officials. I met with Dr. Kane from Marion County Public Health Department yesterday. She published an article in the Indianapolis Star today, and she is adamant that based on where we are currently, we are safe to open in Marion County. We recognize that we still need to take every precaution, again, to access our students and give them the academic, social, emotional, and other needs that they have, and also to provide a safe environment for all of our staff. We will share more details with this either later this evening or tomorrow morning. As I mentioned before, we are presenting this to the board tomorrow evening. I will share that link out. The board meeting will be live streamed, so you can have access to the board meeting as well. Before I move on, I just want to ask our panelists, is there anything that we want to mention before we proceed here? Ryan?
Yes, and collecting the questions and other things that have come up, I believe we need to specifically address the question that's coming up. If I have to be in isolation, do I have to use my own sick days, or are those covered in a different manner? So I would love not to answer that, have Brian Simpkins answer that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Yes, it's abundantly clear that this is at the forefront of many people's minds. And so you may have heard of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. It was passed by the federal government on April 1st and is good at least through calendar year 2020. But that allows employment organizations such as ourselves, in addition to our FMLA policy, to also allow to adjust to the hardships and ability to physically report to work when situations that I had addressed earlier may require one to be in isolation or quarantined. So, typically for FMLA, one has to have worked for us for 12 months and worked 1,250 hours. This federal law allows one to be eligible with just 30 days of employment with us. So there's that. And then in addition, if you are required, whether you're tested positive, you're exhibiting symptoms, or otherwise forced to be quarantined, this federal law allows us, granted all other eligibility requirements are met, to provide Warren Township to essentially spot an employee the first 80 hours, which usually amounts to about 10 work days of leave, where you would not have to tap into your paid illness time. Anything beyond that would essentially revert to FMLA. Not to get too into the weeds, but FMLA in a leave year, which for Warren is July 1 to June 30th. Every employee gets is up to 12 weeks or really 60 work days of FMLA. So if you're in a situation where, again, where you're isolated or forced to be quarantined, as part of the process that I mentioned earlier, we will work with you. We would walk through that and be able to, for most people in that situation, not have you tap into your paid illness leave for those first 10 work days. And then from there, if more time is needed, then one would have to use their own illness days in accordance with our current FMLA policy.
Ryan, any other questions we want to address before we move on? I will take that as a no.
Yeah,
okay.
There's a few we can wrap up to the end. Let me collect them.
Okay.
Dr. Hansen, can I chime in? Sorry.
Yep.
So I'm monitoring the Q&A tab, which is helpful, and with the questions that come in, especially with the announcement of the alternating days. I just want to clarify, all staff will, at this time, all staff will report to work 5 days a week. The alternating days is for students. The primary reason we alternate the student attendance days is to reduce the capacity of the buildings to provide for more adequate social distancing. So there's a lot of questions that are popping up as far as will I be paid when on my alternating day when I don't go to work. The alternating day, again, is for students only. Staff will report 5 days a week. And with the addition of the virtual option for 612 and the alternating day schedule, which cuts the building capacity down or reduces the number of students by 50% in the building, Based on our current virtual enrollment numbers, we're actually looking at the high school, for example, having somewhere between 40 and 45% of its student body in on one day, rather than 100% capacity at, what's currently enrolled is 3,800. So the primary reason for the shift in alternating day provides the social distancing space for all students in all classrooms, and primarily, obviously, at the upper grades, specifically 6 through 12, when classrooms may be smaller and different setups, it provides for a much reasonable board management of social distancing. But staff works every day.
Good clarification. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Rachel Burke and offer her the opportunity for some closing comments.
So I want to thank all of you for your time this afternoon. At one point in time, we hit at least 588 people who were not panelists on this webinar, and I know that you've all taken time out of your day to join us. I personally, and the board as a whole, have heard from many of you, particularly over the past week, particularly over the past 48 hours. And many of you have offered very strong opinions in many directions. All of those concerns have been taken seriously. I really hope that this webinar and the discussion that has happened today has made that very clear. Obviously, we have made a shift, and that shift is for the safety and comforts of our staff, as well as the students, but with a recognition that 3,000 people in one building in the high school in a passing period at one time just seemed like a lot. I hope that this gives many of you comfort. I want to stress something that Dr. Hansen said earlier. At a minimum, we will be following the directives of the state and county health departments. We look at this data every day. I look at the dashboard data more than can possibly be healthy, to be perfectly honest. We take the little spikes and the little dips very seriously. We have a lot of discussion about weekend slump. We are not ignoring this problem. We are not pretending it doesn't exist. We are not putting our heads in the sand. This alternative has come up, and the solution that we have has come up because we honestly believe this is the best option we have right now. Our students need us. We know that students need to be in school. There are students who simply do. But the safety of our teachers and the safety of our staff is something that we simply could not ignore. I'm going to say today, and I will probably say tomorrow, there is no perfect plan. There is no plan in which a magic wand comes down and makes sure everyone and everything is okay, that accounts for everything. This is the first plan I have heard that comforts me and leaves me with the ability to sleep at night. I hope that it has been helpful to you. If there are any questions that are still remaining, I know that we've tried really hard to work on them and get them answered. The screen is showing you who to give those to. If you have comments for the board, you can always feel free to email me as well. Thank you so much again for your time, for having so many of you here, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Rachel. 2 more comments before we leave. We will post this webinar video either later today or first thing in the morning when it becomes available. And we are hosting a second employee webinar a week from today, next Tuesday, July 21st at 3 p.m. Some of you have asked if it's going to be a duplicate of today's webinar. There will be some similar information shared. I imagine there will be new information to share. We have reached out to a couple other agencies and asked them to be a part of that webinar, and we can share more information about what the webinar will be about. The link that you used to register for this webinar also was included in that email for next week. We will send that out again in case you need that. But again, we will post this later this evening, and we will have a second webinar next Tuesday. I echo Rachel's comments, and I thank you to all the panelists who participated today. And if you have questions, please send those our way. Please enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Thank you.